I still remember that day. The day my life's biggest mistake became the reason my entire world turned upside down. Back then, I was just a regular girl, working behind the counter at a mall's cash register. Bills piling up, dreams collecting. Dust and life was a series of shifts and deadlines. A CEO, a millionaire. Those words belonged in someone else's story, not mine. It was an ordinary morning until my cousin Sarah called me, her voice shaking. "Meesha, please. Can you cover my airport pickup today? I have an emergency doctor's appointment. It's a VIP client. Just hold a board with Danielle S. written on it. That's it." I hesitated for a second. What did I know about dealing with VIPs? But then I thought, what could go wrong? So, there I was, in a plain white shirt, a pair of jeans, holding a flimsy sign with Danielle S. scrawled across it, standing awkwardly at the arrivals gate. I looked around at people hugging, laughing, rushing by with suitcases. Somewhere inside, me, a flicker of excitement sparked. When else would I get this close to someone important? Minutes later, a tall man in a sharply tailored suit approached me. He had the kind of presence that made the crowd part, his gaze sharp, confident. The kind of man you'd assume ran empires. He glanced at my sign, then at me, a slight frown creasing his brow. "You're here for me?" "Daniel S.?" I cleared my throat. "Yes, sir. Welcome to Lahore." He gave a half smile. "Didn't expect someone like you." I forced a laugh. "Yeah, I get that a lot." He didn't wait for me to take his luggage, picked up his own suitcase and nodded toward the exit. As we walked through the crowd, I stole a glance at him. Everything about this man screamed power. From the way he moved to how people subtly stepped aside for him. In the car, he sat back and studied me. "You look too young to be working in logistics." "Temporary assignment," I said, trying to sound casual. "I'm usually a cashier," he raised an eyebrow. "Cashier? At the airport?" "No. A mall. Just covering for my cousin today. I'm not supposed to be here." He smirked. "Well, neither am I." The ride was surprisingly easy. We didn't talk about the weather or boring formalities. Somehow we ended up discussing business, people, life philosophies. I was shocked someone like him, a man who probably earned my monthly salary in a minute, cared about what I thought. At one point he asked, "If you had $1 million, what would you do?" I didn't even hesitate. I'd create a platform where ordinary people could pitch their ideas. No fancy suits, no elite investors making them beg. Just raw ideas, getting real chances. He tilted his head, actually intrigued. "Not bad. Most people say they'd buy a mansion or a yacht." I shrugged. I guess ideas are a better investment. When we reached his hotel, he stepped out, glanced back and said, "Thanks for the ride, Meesha." I blinked. How did he know my name? I didn't remember mentioning it. But before I could ask, a flustered hotel concierge ran up. "Sir Daniel, we've been waiting. Your car went to the other terminal." I felt my stomach drop. "Wait. What? The man I just picked up wasn't Daniel S.? You're not Daniel S.? I blurted out. He smirked, his eyes glinting with amusement. "Nope. But I do enjoy interesting detours." I didn't know whether to scream, apologize, or crawl into a hole. But before I could say a word, he extended his hand, his grip firm and warm. "See you again, idea girl." And with that, he disappeared through the hotel's glass doors, leaving me standing there, humiliated, confused, but weirdly exhilarated. 2 days later, Sarah barged into my room, practically shrieking. "Meesha, do you know who you picked up?" I groaned. "Some random businessman, okay? Don't remind me." "No," she yelped, waving her phone at me. "You picked up David Sinclair." "Who?" she gaped at me. "Only the youngest self-made billionaire in the region, the tech giant from Silicon Valley. You gave him a ride and talked business with him for 30 minutes. I felt my knees go weak. David Sinclair. The man whose face was on the cover of every business magazine my broke self could never afford to buy. The man who could write $1,000,000 checks like I wrote grocery lists. That day, that accidental pickup, wasn't a mistake. It was the beginning of everything, a sign from the universe, a detour I never saw coming. After that day at the hotel, my mind couldn't stop racing. I kept replaying every word we exchanged in the car. His smirk, his sharp eyes, the way he called me idea girl. For 2 days, I kept wondering if it was real, or just one of those bizarre moments life throws at you and then snatches away forever. But fate had other plans. It was late afternoon when my phone rang, an unknown number. My first instinct was to ignore it, but something told me to pick up. Hello? A crisp, commanding voice answered, Meesha, David Sinclair. For a second, I forgot how to breathe, he continued. I never got to thank you properly for that ride. I'm hosting a small business meetup tonight. Thought you might be interested. I wanted to ask 100 questions, but all I managed was, why me? His voice held a trace of humor. Because you're the first person in months who didn't treat me like a walking ATM. And because you had an idea worth hearing, I hesitated. I didn't have a fancy degree, didn't own a tailored suit, and barely knew anyone beyond my mall cashier counter, but something inside me, the same stubborn part that survived paycheck to paycheck, said, say yes. I'll be there, I whispered. That evening I stood outside a sleek, glass-walled building, my reflection staring back at me in my best, but modest dress. People in tailored suits, luxury watches, and designer heels walked past me like I didn't exist. Inside, the room was alive with chatter. Screens displayed market trends, venture proposals, and company stocks. The air smelled of ambition. I felt out of place, like a street kid accidentally dropped into a palace. But then, there he was, David Sinclair. He spotted me immediately, a small grin tugging at his lips. He gestured for me to follow. We stepped aside into a quieter corner, away from the polished elites. You showed up, he said. I said I would. He studied me for a moment, then handed me a glass of water. You ever thought about starting your own business? I laughed nervously. Sure, about 100 times. Just never had the money. Money is the easiest part, he said. The real currency is vision and guts. He pulled out a tablet and showed me something that looked like a basic business plan template. I'm looking for someone local, someone who knows the pulse of ordinary people here. I'm planning to launch a small business incubation platform. Nothing too formal, just real people pitching real ideas. I blinked. And you're asking me? You impressed me. You're unpolished, unfiltered, exactly what this place needs. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he might hear it. He leaned in. If you're in, you start tomorrow. No contracts, no promises. But if you can prove yourself, I'll make sure you never have to stand behind a cash counter again. I swallowed hard. It felt unreal. 2 days ago, I was counting coins for someone's grocery bill. Now I was being offered a seat at a table I didn't even know existed. What? Do you say idea girl? And without thinking, I said the words that changed my life. I'm in. The next morning, I reported to a modest office space downtown. A far cry from the luxurious towers in movies, but it felt like a kingdom to me. David wasn't there. Instead, a manager named Zara greeted me. You're the girl from the airport? She asked, raising a brow. Heard you got guts. I smiled. I try. The job wasn't glamorous. I started by answering emails, compiling reports, and setting up meetings. But I watched. I listened. I asked questions. Every day, I learned something new about business structures, investor pitches, and market gaps. I made mistakes, big ones. Messed up a client schedule, misspelled a proposal name, forgot to attach an important document. But every time I thought it was over, David would text one line. Fail faster. Learn quicker. Those words became my mantra. In between, he'd call me into meetings, letting me observe negotiations. I saw how deals were made, how people with nothing but a bold pitch walked out with funding. One evening, while staying late to clean up files, David walked in. "Why are you still here?" I shrugged. "Learning." He leaned against the desk. "You ever wonder why I gave you this shot?" I hesitated. "Honestly, every day." He smiled. "Because people like you are dangerous. You've got nothing to lose and everything to prove. That's who changes the world." That night I realized this wasn't charity. It wasn't kindness. It was strategy. David Sinclair knew how to spot raw, untamed ambition, and he saw it in me. By month's end, I pitched my first proposal, a local vendor app that connected small, home-based businesses to neighborhood buyers. David raised a brow at my presentation. "It's risky, I know. Unscalable. Maybe." He smiled. "I like it." And just like that, he gave me my first microfund. It wasn't much, but it was enough to build a prototype and hire 2 developers. I was no longer a cashier. I was a founder, and for the first time in my life, I was building something that was mine. If you think once you get your first business idea funded, life magically falls into place, let me burst that bubble. Starting was easy. Surviving? That was a war. The tiny vendor app we built, Local Link, launched within 6 weeks. At first, it was exciting. Vendors signed up, orders trickled in. The team celebrated every tiny win like it was a Fortune 500 deal. I remember the first official order, a woman named Razia selling homemade pickles. She called me crying, thanking me for giving her a platform. That night, I felt like I'd done something that mattered. But euphoria fades fast. Within 3 months, the app crashed twice. Vendors complained about delayed payments. Customers stopped returning because the interface was buggy. The developers I'd hired, both fresh graduates like me, were overwhelmed. One evening, I found myself sitting alone in the tiny office, staring at negative feedback reports piling up in my inbox. David walked in. "You look like someone just ran over your puppy." I sighed. It's falling apart. He didn't offer sympathy, no motivational quotes, just one sharp question. "What did you learn?" I hesitated. "That people don't care about ideas. They care about execution." He grinned. "Good. What's your next move?" "I need better developers and someone who understands supply chains." "Then get them." I laughed bitterly. "David, I don't even have the budget to fix my coffee machine." He leaned in. "Then pitch. Convince someone. Sell your desperation. It's your greatest asset." That night I sent out 10 emails to local investors. Only one responded, an elderly businessman named Malik Ahmed. He agreed to meet for 5 minutes at a local tea shop. I remember sitting across from him, hands shaking, trying to pitch Local Link while he barely looked up from his phone. "When I finished," he asked. "Why should I trust a broke girl with my money?" I swallowed hard. "Because I'm the only one desperate enough to fight for this like my life depends on it. And because no one else is willing to take a chance on these vendors." He looked at me for a long moment, then slid a check across the table. "Small." "Start," he said. "Don't screw it up." That check wasn't much, but it bought me new developers, a part-time operations manager, and a rebuilt app. The second launch, the second version of Local Link, was smoother, faster, and better organized. We focused on a niche, home-based food vendors. No fashion, no electronics, just home-cooked meals. Orders tripled in the first month. Word spread among neighborhoods. Housewives who'd never earned a rupee before were now making money from their kitchens. And then came the real test. A local TV channel did a feature story on us. Overnight, we were swamped. 5,000 downloads in a day. Orders flooded in. Vendors panicked. Deliveries failed. It was chaos. I was working 20-hour days, surviving on coffee and adrenaline. My team shrank because some couldn't handle the pressure. Friends stopped. Calling because I was always at work. My savings ran dry. I skipped rent, but I didn't quit. Because every time I felt like breaking, I'd remember David's words. Fail faster. Learn quicker. And every time we fixed a glitch, calmed a customer, or made a successful delivery, it felt like a tiny, private victory. The turning point 6 months after the second launch, David called me to his office. "You're making noise," he said, dropping a newspaper on his desk. There it was, a headline about Local Link crossing 20,000 active users. I grinned. He leaned back. "You ready for the next level?" I hesitated. "What does that mean?" "A regional expansion." I stared at him. "David, I barely survived Lahore." He shrugged. "Good. Then you've built immunity." I wanted to refuse. I was exhausted. My family hadn't seen me in months. My health was a mess. But how do you say no when the person you admire most hands you a golden ticket? So, I said yes. Bigger battles, bigger lessons. Expansion meant new cities, new problems, different markets, different regulations. We faced digital fraud, delivery scams, a social media boycott when a competitor accused us of underpaying vendors. I hit my lowest point when an investor backed out at the last minute, leaving me with debt I had no way to repay. That night, I called David, ready to give up. "I'm done," I said. "I messed up." He didn't console me, just asked, "You remember why you started?" To give people chances no one else would. Then finish what you started. His belief in me was maddening. It left me no room to stay defeated. I went back, faced my team, admitted my mistakes, and rebuilt trust. We adjusted policies, fired dishonest vendors, improved customer support, and brought transparency. Slowly, we climbed back. Breaking through by our second anniversary, Local Link had expanded to 5 cities, served 300,000 orders, and empowered 8,000 home-based vendors, 80% of them women. We got investment offers, media coverage, awards. But the moment that truly made me feel like I'd made it, an elderly vendor named Apa Ruxana visited our office with a box of homemade sweets. She'd just paid for her granddaughter's college tuition with the money she earned through Local Link. She cried while thanking me. That night, I sat alone in the office, looking at our journey chart on the wall, from one vendor to thousands, and I cried too. By the time Local Link hit its 3rd anniversary, it wasn't just a business, it was a movement. We were in 10 cities. We'd processed over 1 million orders. Thousands of women who once sat in silence behind household walls were now independent, proud, and earning, investors called. Partnerships formed. I was invited to speak at conferences I'd once only watched on YouTube. But through it all, one thing remained unchanged. David Sinclair's relentless belief in pushing me beyond every limit I thought I had. Then one afternoon, everything shifted. The boardroom bombshell David called me into his office. Only this time, it wasn't just the two of us. His legal team, his CFO, and a few unfamiliar faces were there. I felt a strange knot in my stomach. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice tight. David smiled. That same calm, knowing smile he'd given me the day I picked him up at the airport. By mistake. "You remember when you told me you'd build something bigger than your circumstances?" I nodded. "Well, you did, and now it's time to own it." He slid a thick folder toward me. "I'm selling you Local Link." I blinked, certain I misheard. "Wait, what?" "You've built it. You've grown it. And frankly, you've taken it places I never imagined. I invested in your idea, Meesha, but this was always yours." I stared at the contract. It wasn't a token share transfer. He was offering me 100% ownership, at a valuation that would officially make me a billionaire overnight. My hands shook. "David, I can't afford this." He laughed. "Who said anything about money? You've paid in blood, sweat, failure, and grit. That's the real price of ownership." I was speechless. He leaned forward. Do you know what my mentor told me when I built my first company? I shook my head. The world doesn't owe you success, but it respects people who refuse to stay small. He gestured to the folder. You're not small anymore, idea girl. Signing my future. That night, after reading every line of the contract 100 times, I signed it. In that moment, the broke cashier who once begged for extra shifts became a self-made billionaire. Not through inheritance. Not through luck, through grit, through backbreaking work, through believing in an idea when no one else did. I called my mother first. She cried so hard she couldn't speak. I visited my old mall job. The same manager who once denied me overtime shook my hand, stunned. And I made one promise to myself, to become for others what David had been for me, a believer, a catalyst, a risk-taker. A new beginning, I turned Local Link into a regional startup accelerator. We funded over 400 small businesses, trained 3,000 entrepreneurs, and launched ventures in food, crafts, digital services, and education. We built an empire of underdogs. And every year on the anniversary of that fateful airport pickup, I'd text, David, one word, grateful. His reply never changed. Told you so. The final lesson: success didn't make life easier. It made the stakes higher, the decisions tougher. The failures bigger, but I'd learned the most powerful currency in this world wasn't money. It was resilience, and the greatest asset wasn't opportunity. It was audacity, to show up when you didn't belong, to stay when you felt out of place, and to fight like hell for what you believed in. I was no longer Meesha, the cashier. I was Meesha Khan, founder, CEO, and billionaire. And it all began with one simple accidental moment at an airport. A moment that proved life doesn't hand you opportunities. It disguises them as mistakes, and those who are bold enough to claim them rewrite their story. The end.